And welcome back. Well, it's been a little bit since our last video. I apologize for that. Work has been busy, demanding pretty much all my available time during the week, to include a lot of my weekends. But hopefully that'll wrap up here short and we can kind of get back to things. But in the meantime, as I spoke about before, we are getting parts in. As you can see here, we got a table full of them. They are coming in slowly but surely, just due to parts availability and things the way that they are these days. But if you haven't seen the video series before, we are to the point that we are looking at getting everything in. You can see here to start working on the performance upgrade for our Red Ram Project X, also known as Candy Apple. If you're unfamiliar with the series, just to give you a little bit of recap here, we have a 2012 Ram 1500. It's an ST, so pretty much a base level trim package. And we got from an auction last year. Now, the original intent for that Ram was to be used as a parts Ram for a previous build series on a 2009 TRX4. We elected not to need it for a parts Ram, as we were able to rebuild the 2009, putting mostly pretty much all newer parts in it to include the engine. So when we got back to looking at the condition of our Red Ram and saw that it had an excellent body on it, an excellent frame, the interior need a little bit of work, engine need a little bit of work, but it start, ran, drive. And we started to look into using that one, or starting the build process on that Ram and turning it into a street slash a street slash sleeper slash track truck. Now, the previous videos in this series, you've seen us get a hold of yet another Ram, a 2009, if I remember correctly, 2009 or 2010, I think it was a 2010 blue 1500. That was a sport Ram. We took the heated and ventilated seats, as well as the better dash and the various other internal pieces, migrated it into our Red Ram, did the wiring and the programming necessary to get those heated and ventilated and powered seats to work in our Red Ram. Our Ram originally came with just factory manual seats. That's now all been replaced with power seats. So now that we have the bulk of our interior work done, we're looking at starting and getting the engine pulled and doing the performance build of this engine. And what you see here is a handful of the parts that have come in thus far. We still got more parts to get. This is just what's come into this point. And just to start you off here, we are going with a 2.5 high lift cam from Jay Green. I get all my performance parts from him, as well as all my tunes. Never had an issue with the tune. Never have had an issue with a single performance part I've purchased from him. So what you can see here on the table is the comp cams. It's a Jay Green grind. It's a 2.5 high lift, spec'd out, to be also used with a ProCharge supercharger. We've got intake and exhaust hardened push rods. We've got a cam phaser limiter that we need as a requirement of doing this build, because due to the changes in the cam and the changes of how far it's going to open the valves, we need to limit how much of a change the phaser can make as far as to the timing, so that way we don't do things like, slam valves and the pistons. These are replacement springs. Along with the springs, we've got new retainers, and we have new shims to put under the springs. So we'll be removing the factory springs, the factory retainers, the factory shims, and replacing everything with the kit that you see here. Now, the next piece that we got off of our Jay Green kit, which you can see here, what a lot of people call, quote, unquote, what they refer to as a Hellcat lifter. Now, what these are non-MDS upgraded lifters. And we'll show you this when we get to it, but what you're seeing here is, again, it's a non-MDS lifter, but it's also the upgraded one. So the needle bearings inside the roller part of the lifter on this are the much thicker, more stouter, revised ones. Now, you'll see the water pump sitting here, which is a factory OEM water pump. Normally, I like to go factory with these. If I can't get the factory one, then I'll usually go Gates. I like to use Gates for all my heating and cooling needs. Now, I like the factory ones a little bit better. Yes, they're a little bit more pricey, but if you have a water pump like this one is here that has sensors in it, every time I've ordered an OEM one, it's always also come with a replacement sensor, which you can see here. So part of that increased cost is just an increased cost in general because it's the factory unit. But again, you're also getting a new sensor, which a lot of the factory aftermarket ones I've used in the past generally will not come with new sensors. You either have to transfer them over from your previous one, or you have to buy them yourself. Let's get this guy moved off here to the side. I'll show you the part number for that water pump. I apologize. There's that one there. I showed you the phase there. I showed you that. Okay, and the next, and if you've watched our channel before, you know we're a fan of our ARP head bolts. Again, nothing wrong with using the factory head bolts. The manual even says that as long as the bolt isn't stretched, you can reuse the factory head bolts. But my preference here is to use the ARP ones. They're 12-point fasteners. They're a little bit more stout than a factory fastener. Plus, these just get torqued in equal increments up to 100. They don't use a degree. The factory ones, I think you torque them into 3 increments set to a certain foot-pound, and then on the last one, you do like an additional 90 degrees. These don't require that. They have their own torquing procedure. I'll show you that part number. You'll notice that sticker says 5.7 or 6.1. These also work for 6.4 because we have a build series in which we did a replacement cam on a 6.4 2500, which also has a Pro Charger on it. We went back and used the ARP head studs on its rebuild, as well as our 2009 also has ARP head studs. Again, I like the ARP hardware. What can I say? It's work has and I'm sure will continue to work well for us. Also, if you notice the builds we always do in this channel, we have a Hellcat oil pump. The reason why we go with these is that they have more volume in this oil pump versus the stock one for a 5.7 Hemi. So more volume equals more pressure. Remember, your oil pump is responsible for volume. You get your pressure from that volume of oil being squeezed through your bearings and various oil passages within the engine. So this will give us our increased volume, which in turn gives us our increased pressure. That increased volume means we're going to get more oil to our critical oiling components, aka such as our lifters, up at the top end of the motor. Again, we're building a custom motor. It's not going to hurt for us to have a little extra lubrication within those parts. You see a MAL part number here. These are for the exhaust manifold gaskets. I bought MAL ones because you're going to see that we have some in a Felpro kit here next, but the MAL ones are just a little bit thicker. I've used these before. I'm happy with them. Again, no dig against Felpro. I'm sure we could use the Felpro ones and they work fine. Now, I bought this kit because it came with the head gaskets, but it came with a bunch of other pieces. Some of these pieces we may need, we may use, some we may not. Again, we've already kind of covered that. It comes with exhaust manifold gaskets. These are for the valve cover around the spark plug wells. These are the intake gaskets. And it's kind of a universal kit because it's trying to cover several Hemi engines here and different vintage of Hemi engines, because some of these parts are for if you have Eagle heads and some are pre-Eagle. For instance, you know, this, if I remember correctly, isn't used on a 5.7. This is the water pump gasket. I'm sorry, not water pump, but thermostat gasket on the water pump. Usually the thermostats have like a rubber seal, a rubber O-ring that goes around them, and they just set in place, and the top cap just sits on top of it with its, I believe it has its own seal, or it just uses the one in the thermostat. But I don't think generally they use this paper gasket. This one appears to be for the throttle body. But there's also another one within here that also has some PCV gaskets in it. Again, for the intake, it looks like it's got some PCV gaskets, I'm sorry, EGR gaskets in here as well as that also looks like a throttle body gasket. So again, depending on the version of Hemi engine that you have is going to kind of dictate which bag of parts that you need to use. Best thing to do is just compare the old seal you're taking off with the new seal to make sure you're using the right one. And you can see it by the way those are treated. That also looks like possibly EGR gasket there. And I know that on a newer Eagle style head they don't use this for an exhaust manifold. That looks like a flange, like an exhaust flange gasket, the bigger one, but I know the Hemis I deal with, they all use the donuts where the collectors meet up. It also looks like it comes with valve cover bolt replacement grommets, which again on the newer valve covers, the bolt and the grommet are kind of one piece and you can't really take them apart to replace the seals, so we may not be able to use these. And it did come with valve stem seals as well. It also looks like it came with 8 of these thicker O-rings, which look to be the O-rings that go on the bottom of the fuel injectors. I don't know why they didn't give us ones for the tops, but there's only 8 of them, and based on their thickness, that looks like the ones for the bottom of the fuel injector. Probably because you're going to be taking that fuel rail off, and to do like the lower intake gaskets, and I guess before you go to put those injectors in, they probably give you new seals. Because the injector, as you know, is clipped in place on the top of the fuel rail, and you don't have to remove the injectors from the fuel rail to get the rail of injectors off the intake. Not sure what these O-rings are for, other than we have 2 of them. You can see that we've got valve cover gaskets. I will not be using these valve cover gaskets. If you've seen in a previous video, and I'll show you why, we can do this experiment when I get a hold of the valve cover off the engine we're working on, is that even though these press in place, they don't grip well. And if you're in a situation where you're trying to work on an engine while it's in the bay or still installed in the truck or in the engine compartment, you have to flip the valve cover obviously right side up and kind of angle it and to get it to where it needs to be. And I was trying this with a set of Felpro ones on the 2009, and every time I turned the valve cover over, these would fall right out. They wouldn't hold in at all. But you can see this is primarily the reason why we got the kit, because it did come with our head gaskets, which we've used these on a couple builds before. I'm happy with those. Now getting in here to the first box in the lower section here, you can see that we've got some Gates hoses. This is our upper radiator hose. Sorry if some of these part numbers are upside down. There we go. And there's our bottom hose. Now I went with Gates being third party on these because I've used Gates hoses before. The only issue with going with the third party in this case versus the new one, a new one from the factory will come with new hose clamps. As long as your clamps are good, you can just, go third party on the hoses. The other deal was that for these hoses for a factory set, man, they were pretty pricey. For even though they came with new clamps, they were pretty pricey. So I elected to go third party on them. Now these are, I'll show you that part number here. These are for the pickup tube on the oil pump. What the manual states is that anytime you take that pickup tube out of that oil pump, you're supposed to replace these O-rings, because you definitely don't want to leak there. You get a leak there, the pump's either not going to pick up oil as efficient as it should, or potentially not at all, and it's going to cause you to have a really bad day. Now inside this box here is also a complete timing set, factory based timing set. So we've got a tensioner, we've got our guide, which this one was a little hard to get a hold of. Every place I looked that sold Mopar parts either said it, pretty much said it was unavailable. Managed to finally find this one on eBay, as well as that feels like our sprocket. So our lower crank sprocket, and then that way this is going to be our timing chain, as well as our phaser. See that? Now I'm going to show you another timing set here in a second, but I'll kind of explain why I elected to go back to a factory set rather than use a third-party set. Let me show you this part number. This is our windage tray / oil pan gasket, and I find that all of these parts you see here pretty much were ordered from either mymoparparts.com or Rock Auto. Rock Auto generally has these windage tray assemblies, and generally they're pretty expensive. I think they're like $30-ish range, somewhere around in there. And usually if these are available, I like to go OEM on these rather than aftermarket. Now, speaking of aftermarket parts that we've used before and we're going to be using in this engine, these are again another set of intake gaskets. I've used these before. I'm happy with them. I'm going to use these in the build up here. Now this one, if you'll notice, didn't come with the little peanut gaskets. I'm sorry, not peanut, but they're kind of peanut shaped, but they're for the PCV gaskets on the intake. You notice this didn't come with it, which is kind of interesting. They gave you just the square ones for the around the intake openings themselves. So we may have to at least use the PCV gaskets out of our Felpro kit. What else do we have in here? Yep, now these are valve stem seals, and yes, the Felpro kit did come with valve stem seals, but I've used Mall seals now for my builds. I've got some history with them, some experience. I'm comfortable using these. And again, since we're building a performance engine and I know these work, and I've used these with supercharged builds up before, they've been fine. I'm going to go in with these. And I bought an extra set. The other one hasn't arrived yet, but this is just another head gasket. I bought an extra set of these. So in the event that we're doing the assembly, like if the head gets dragged across one of these areas by accident and damages like one of these blue areas where it creates its seal around either a water passage or an oil passage or around the combustion chamber. In other words, if we should happen to scratch or damage this, then I want an extra set of these head gaskets on hand so we're not waiting to get a replacement. Because I've had that happen before, where we were reinstalling heads on a block that was still in the vehicle, which is very cumbersome to do, especially on a truck, and the head inadvertently got drug across an area and scraped part of that sealing surface. So we had to went back in, better safe than sorry, and just replace the head gasket on that side before final assembly. So let me get your part number here. This is a timing cover gasket. And as I stated earlier, get it out of the box, get your part number view. This is for the valve covers. So you can see we've got their peanut gaskets, which go around our spark plug wells, and we've got the perimeter gaskets. And I can do a comparison and show you when we're ready that once I press these in place on the set of valve covers, then you can turn that valve cover completely upside down and even shake it, and generally these will not fall out. Much easier as far as the install aspect is concerned. So let me get myself situated here, put some of these parts away in the box, and what I want to show you next is what you can see here is another timing set. These are all from Melling. Now Melling makes quite a bit of automotive parts, as well as an upgraded oil pump for the older Hemis, which allow you that same, I think, 90 to 100 psi and extra flow like a Hellcat oil pump allows you to do if you have one of the pre-2009, like 2008 or older Hemi, and you need the different style oil pump. Melling makes an oil pump that'll give you kind of that same Hellcat oil pump performance. So when I was looking for timing gear at the time, a lot of the factory ones weren't available, so I went with Melling on it. And then as these came in, the factory ones became available. Now, Melling makes good components. I've never used these particular components, let alone in a performance application. So I went ahead and opted, even though I had these in, to go ahead and order the factory set that you saw. Now, don't worry, these won't go to waste. We will use these in a build. And then that way it'll give us experience in it, it'll give us the comfort level in it, and then once I use these in a standard build, then absolutely when they prove themselves or I'm comfortable with them and have that experience with them, then we'll use them in a performance application. But I figured it might be kind of interesting to show you the phaser here. So this is the Melling phaser compared to the OEM phaser. Now, one thing you can see here, which I'm kind of interested in, is that you'll see the size of the Torx bolts in this Melling phaser. Much beefier than the OEM one. Now, one thing we have to do is that we have to install that phase limiter that I showed you earlier in this phaser, again, to keep bad things from happening. And what happens is, and there's a special tool we have to install. Don't worry, we'll do videos on this. We'll cover all this as we do the tear down and build up. But there's a special tool you install to back out one of the springs, and then all but one of these bolts, one bolt will get loosened and not removed. The other ones will be removed. You do not want to remove all of them, otherwise the spring on the inside of this will unwind and make it useless. But you'll see how much smaller those are. And I like the fact how much bigger these are, because it allows you to use a much bigger Torx bit to break these loose with. Because if I remember correctly, when we go to reassemble these get torqued down to about 16 foot-pounds. So you got to crank on these pretty good to get them down to that level. And having a bigger Torx bit on it is going to help. But again, like I said, I've used the factory ones with supercharged applications before. I know that they use them with supercharged applications, like in the Hellcat, for example, and they're fine. And like I said, it's no dig against Melling. Obviously, we have the kit here. We will use it for a build-up, don't worry. And we'll take you along when we do that. And that way, when we install this, it'll be an entire Melling setup, and it'll allow us to put it through its paces. And then we'll definitely use it in additional builds going forward, depending on how that turns out. But I'm just being honest with you. So again, it's a little bit of an expense because we change gears. But like I said, don't worry. These will be used. They won't go to waste. But you can see one of the pieces that we were waiting on did finally come in, and that is the high stall torque converter. So I believe this one was spec'd to be 32 to 3400 RPM high stall. We also opted to go triple disc lockup in this. Now we want triple disc lockup in this based on the individual I bought it from, who races and drags a lot of Ram builds and does a lot of testing, as I understand it, for various cams. And he suggested, knowing that we were going to supercharge this application, he suggested that we go with the triple disc on this as well. So the cam is spec'd to work with this torque converter. So we're getting into the realm of this build in which we're getting parts that are deliberately spec'd to work with each other. So keep that one in mind. So this is it'll be the first time on this channel that we go to install a performance aftermarket torque converter. Now this is why when we were doing the fluid changes and everything on the red Ram, I kept insisting that we drive it around, make sure that the transmission feels like it's in good shape, because it is a bit high mileage. Because I want to make sure the transmission is good before we go slapping a nice torque converter on it, and heaven forbid if something mechanical should happen to that torque converter and transmission, and send a bunch of trash in the torque converter, and make us have to order another one of these, which I really wouldn't want to have to do. But thankfully I've been driving the red truck around. It's been fine, hasn't exhibited any issues. Not to say that it won't, but it's not right now. So one of the other items you see, which is in that bigger box right there, and that is an electric fan. Now, it is an electric cooling fan out of a Ram, yes, but it is out of a V6 Ram. Now, it's a very popular mod that a lot of individuals have done online already for their 1500s with a 5.7, in which they remove the mechanical clutch fan and the smaller electric fan and replace it all with the bigger, much wider electric fan, again, that comes out of a V6 Ram. Now that's an aftermarket one that you see there, because I couldn't get a factory one. Most places, when I looked at the part number, a lot of places are saying that that part is discontinued at this point. Discontinued and or just completely unavailable. But I did find an aftermarket one for it. So again, what we're going to do on this build is we're going to take the mechanical clutch fan, take it out, do away with it. We're also going to do away with the smaller electric fan, which does come on. It comes on when the engine reaches past a certain temperature, or if you turn on the air conditioner. So again, mechanical clutch fan out, old fan shroud out, old electric fan out, and it's all going to get replaced with this much bigger electric fan, which also comes with its own shroud. Now, along with that, since we are going to obviously have the engine tuned to account for A, the supercharger, B, the cam, we're also going to put in a lower temperature thermostat, which thermostat hasn't come in yet. I believe it's about 170 degree thermostat, 170 or 180 degree thermostat. And then we'll also change the settings on the truck so that this electric fan comes on sooner than it normally would, since this electric fan is now going to be the primary cooling method in the truck rather than a secondary method. So I think that is it in a kind of a quick, high-level nutshell. Now, there are several other items that are still on order and have not come in yet. We'll do another video when those do come in. And we've ordered various replacement bolts for cam and crank, as well as bolts for the exhaust manifolds. Because those bolts are prone to breaking, when we take all that off and go to reassemble everything, we're going to be putting new exhaust manifold bolts on as, again, part of the reassembly. Because I don't want to use used bolts and have one break on me and then have to go back in there later and, dig out a broken bolt and replace it, and all the joy that comes along with it. Now, the comments on the supercharger. Originally, we were looking at doing a tune that would allow this cam to work without the supercharger. I'm still on the fence. I'm not quite sure if we want to do the build-up without it and add it later, or do the build-up with it. The issue with the supercharger is not that we can't get one. The issue is with those things are mildly heftily priced. Even years ago when we got the supercharger for the 2500, it's got a pretty good price tag on it, not going to lie. And the cost of everything just gone up the last couple of years. Those have gone up, following suit along with everything else. So, and again, I doubt anybody from Pro Charger watches this video, but hey, perchance if you are, and you want to help a smaller channel out, put a bunch of instructional videos together on installing the supercharger, as well as how that supercharger is going to work with the high lift cam, hook a channel up. There you go. I said it. I'm honest, man. I'll be honest about it. And yes, and I'm gonna look at my pride getting away. I'll take something. I'll take something for free or something at a discount. So all joking aside, so with that being said, I'm still kind of on the fence. I'm not quite sure if we want to do it all in one go like that or break it up. I have looked at the kit. I know the kit that we need to get, and I've got a source to get it from. Like I said, I'm still kind of on the fence about it. We may opt to do it. I'm kind of, to be honest with you, I'm leaning more towards go ahead and picking up the supercharger and doing that as part of the build rather than doing it after the fact. I don't know. If you've got an opinion on it, feel free to kind of drop it in the comments in there as kind of maybe how you'd want to see things go, whether you'd want to see us build it up without it and kind of see how things perform and then add it as after the fact, or do it all as one big build. We're also looking at the exhaust system on the truck as well. I've got a new muffler spec'd out for that, which should turn it, allow it its normal Hemi grumble. One thing I've noticed with this particular 2012 is that it doesn't have the right exhaust tone on it. It doesn't have the typical low-end grumble that pretty much any other 1500 that I've driven has. Well, we've got the muffler that's in a watch list. It's another item that we need to order, but we've already got it spec'd out. We've already got it kind of waiting in the winds, but it should change that for us. And obviously that's what I was saying. We got a lot of parts in, as you can see. We've got a lot more parts we need to get in to continue getting things prepped for this build, and obviously we'll bring you along and perchance at least do another video showcasing the remainder of those parts coming in prior to us pulling the engine, getting the truck back in here to pull the engine out. So with that being said, I'm going to call it a video at this point. I wanted to get something out there because I realized it's been a while since we've done a posting. Again, I apologize for that. Work's been busy, and as work is the primary bill payer, again, work's got to come first before we can do the videos. Now, maybe at such point in the future, if the channel gets as the channel continues to grow, not if, but as the channel continues to grow, maybe at some point in the future, it can become the primary focus. But for now, I just kind of have to play with the time that becomes available, and hopefully you guys will forgive me if a little bit of time goes by that we don't post a video, either A, because work's busy, or B, as we're just waiting for kind of parts to come in. So with that being said, if you have not subscribed already, please consider to do so. We have broken the 1,600 subscriber count, and I thank everybody for that. As far as best ways to support the channel, I've been asked that a few times now. The best way that you can do that for now is just to let the ads run. It doesn't cost you anything other than a little bit of time. Just let the ads run. It's how individuals like myself on YouTube get paid for those ads. Although the ads are skippable, my understanding is if you skip the ad, then the creator gets nothing out of that ad if the individual skips it and cuts it out earlier. At least that's the way it's kind of been explained to me. So if you don't mind, just let the ads run. And I have been asked about doing t-shirts and things of that nature. I am looking into it. I'm trying to find a manufacturer of a shirt that I am happy with. And I say that not as a dig against any other creator out there or anybody who does merchandise. I have ordered t-shirts from other channels in the past and ordered like an extra large, for example. Ran it through the washing machine one time and it came out a medium or a large after one washing. And that's what I'm looking to avoid. I don't want to get in a situation where I finally put some merchandise together, people buy it, and after one wash they can't wear the shirt anymore. That's I'm looking for a decent supplier in that regards. So with that being said, enough rambling. I will let you go, and I will bring you back for the next one. And thank you much. Chat you later. Bye.